What if Martin Luther King was much more than a dream? What if Martin Luther King's dream was unfinished? What if when Martin Luther King died, he left an opening for us to finish what he started? What if there was more to Martin Luther King than with the eyes and with the mouths showed and told us? What if Martin Luther King had something else planned that doesn't get captured in history or taught in school? What if Martin Luther King's dream is unfinished? What if we are left to finish it? What if? Find out more in this episode of the Past and Present Podcast with your host, Alan McGrady. Stay tuned. Martin Luther King Jr. was the father of the Civil Rights Movement, a man who had a dream that all people could live together in harmony, that black people would finally see equality, a future where they didn't deal with segregation, Jim Crow laws, where they could live a proper life. Those was one of his dreams. As great as a man that Martin Luther King was, he was a man also with faults. Now, as we know, the FBI tapped his phone in their investigation, in their quest to interrupt his journey to create equality in the civil rights movement. They uncovered some things about this great man. Of course, he was an adulterer. If you don't know what that means, he had his relationships with other women. He had his faults. But if you look in any person's closet, including mine, I guarantee you, you're going to find some bones, some skeletons, some things that we all would like to forget. So does that taint the man that he was? In the social media area, would Martin Luther King be able to be Martin Luther King? Would he be able to be the leader that he is today? Would his dream be able to hold up against all the millions of people with now an opinion and a platform to speak their opinion and their own truth or displeasure with one person's truth and the growth that we are trying to accomplish in today's society? We have to wonder, where would Martin Luther King's dreams be if it was today? Let's talk about something. Let's talk about Martin Luther King's unfinished dream. Yeah, we're here to talk about the Poor Man's Campaign. See, Martin Luther King, though he gave that epic speech, that's legendary today that you teach in every classroom around his birthday every single year, the I Had a Dream speech. Though he gave that speech in front of millions, and it has become epic, we can't forget about the Poor Man's Campaign. That in the latter years of Martin Luther King's life, he recognized, though his fight was for equality for black people, his fight was for civil rights, there was a glaring error in his truth, in his mission. The glaring error was, what is equality without financial freedom? Without meaningful wealth? What does equality really means when you don't have the means of financing a capitalistic system? What does it truly mean? If schools and kids are uneducated when they're going to school, if there's homelessness, if we spend more on wars with other countries than we do on poverty in our own country, what does it mean if the forgotten people are being lost and misplaced in the system? What does it mean if there's a wage gap between the upper class and the lower class where the middle class is being wiped away? What does it even mean? What does equality look like without generational wealth? Now we know as black people, as individuals, after slavery was abolished, we were supposed to be given 40 acres and a mule. And we already talked about that in the reparations episode, where we talked about how we didn't receive them and the slave masters actually got the 40 acres and a mule instead of the actual slaves as reparations for losing their slaves. So we're not here to talk about that. But what we're here to talk about is how that disadvantage has translated into today's society. And not only black folks in urban society have been misplaced, ignored, and seen as invisible, but also Caucasian and other races who live in rural locations, have they been part of the forgotten? And how Martin Luther King's true dream, the Poor Man's Campaign, was centered around not only the urban black environment, but those rural areas where Caucasian and poor white folks live too. And bringing all of us together for one campaign, under one umbrella, for one mission, to change the wage gap in between the lower class and the upper class, to finally right that ship and understand that true power don't come unless you have true ownership. See, a lot of times we don't understand finances. As all people, we don't understand finances. Think about it, people. How do you judge finances? You judge finances about what? Your cars, your money, type of sneakers you got, jewelry, all them things you got, and you equate that to wealth, but don't truly understand wealth. But it's not your fault that you don't understand wealth, because how would you understand something that you were never taught? I mean, think about when you go to school, they teach you algebra, but unless you work in a chemist's job or something, what good is algebra doing? Teach you APA, how to write in APA style, but last time I checked, the job don't actually write a report in APA style when you don't use it. So unless you're doing something or taking a job like a chemist or something that actually allows you to do algebra or writing APA style, those educations you're being taught in school are becoming useless. Where when you could teach a child in school, from elementary, middle school, high school, and in college, is about finances, the economy, and how it works, how the unemployment works, how to create wealth, how to budget your account. But that's not taught in school. What about skills so when a child leaves school, they can actually go out and get a job? Let's think about it. When you go to college, you go to 4, 6-year colleges, 8-year colleges, wherever you go, hundreds of thousands of dollars you come out with in debt, but no job. And when you go for a job, what happens? They're asking you about your experience. What experience do you have and what qualifications you have for this job that you're going for? Of course, you got the piece of paper laying in front of you that says you have an education, but what experiences do you have? You don't have any experiences. Why don't you have any experiences? You just spent 6 years in a classroom. You spent 8 years, 4 years in a classroom learning about this job. You haven't had time to get experiences. So if you go to college without a plan, you're ultimately walking out with nothing but a handful of debt. What about the homelessness in society? You probably say, well, okay, they're lazy. But is that true? Think about it for a second. A lot of people are living and working at minimum wage. Jobs are disappearing by days. Toys R Us closed, Kmart closed. Just heard today that Macy's is closing. Stores are closing and being shut down because nobody's going to stores shopping. Everybody's buying online now. So even those lower class jobs don't exist no more. So how do you afford to pay for childcare? How do you afford to keep a roof over your child's head or over your own head? How do you afford to pay for food, medicine, healthcare? How do you afford to do these things without the true economics you need to do it? How do you truly understand money when you never, ever had or was able to learn about money? We put a lot of onus on the schools to actually teach our children things. For instance, schools teach about I Had a Dream speech. We never talk about the Poor Man's Campaign. Never talk about the layers of Martin Luther King and all the other things he'd done before he died. But what about us as parents? What do we teach our children? What do we teach our children about finances? About having a better life? About generational wealth? A lot of times as parents, we don't even have life insurance on ourselves or our kids. So when our children or one of us die, we got to get GoFundMe accounts to pay for those things. These things were not part of Martin Luther King's dream. We spoke about the Poor Man's Campaign and worked to organize it. It wasn't part of that. We felt like we won because we won the war for civil rights, but didn't understand power. True power don't come unless you own something. Because only when you own something, then you can actually make decisions. And you have something to pass down to your children. I mean, if you don't own anything, what decisions can you truly make? You rent a house right now. You want to paint the walls. What you got to do? You got to ask the landlord. You want to do anything in the house, you got to ask the landlord. Why? Because you don't have any power over your own house. And not only that, economically, you're spending more money renting a house than you would if you actually went and bought a house, but you're not taught that. I remember my stepdad, when I was young, he taught me something. He told me something. I was younger, he told me, he's like, Alan, this is how he talks. Alan, He always says before he talks. He always before he talks. That's what he does. All right. So that's what he did. So, Alan, you got you need to start opening a bank account and get a relationship with the banks. So when you want to go buy a house, or a car, they'll loan you money because they'll know who you are. That's how he talks. He always says before everything. You ever heard my dad talk? That's how he talks. It's always like before anything. He has like this deep, raspy voice. But that's how he's talking to me. By the time he was telling me this information, I wasn't really interested in what he was saying. Like every other young person, every other child, every other teenager, young adult, I was rebellious and I wasn't really interested in what he was saying. So how I looked at him when he's telling me this information, I'm like, dude, you don't own a house, you don't own a car. I don't think you got a bank account. So how the heck are you telling me what I need to do as far as creating economic wealth for myself? Why should I listen to you? So I fast forward about 5 or 6 years later. I actually listened to the information he taught me and the information he told me about creating relationships with banks. Creating relationships, letting them get to know me getting to know them. And it worked, just like he said, it worked like a charm. Because when it came time to get a loan, the relationship I created with the banks was very helpful in getting and securing loans I want. But as Black people, we struggle even with that. We struggle with getting a loan, but we also struggle with listening to our parents, thinking that they know best. And a lot of times our parents don't know best. So a lot of times our parents was raised up on poor economic growth and poor economic knowledge. They weren't taught to have discipline when it comes to finances, to really understand how the world works with finances. So they can't carry on knowledge to you that they don't have themselves, that they don't possess. But we think back against Martin Luther King and what he stood for, and what he stood for beyond civil rights and fighting for us to have equal rights, but having equal pay. Talking about the gap, the wage gaps. Talking about schools. Think about this for a second. Schools are so underfunded. So underfunded. Teachers are forced to sit here and teach classes with 30 to 32 students. One teacher to 32 students, and teach these children and expect them to all learn. Schools based off testing and aptitude tests that actually go with their funding. Schools are underfunded. Schools are underfunded, meaning the poor and disenfranchised children, whether they live in a rural or urban neighborhood, are the victims of these underfunded schools. So not only are they already currently living in a financially unfortunate financial situation, but they're being raised and taught to not grow, to get financial wealth, because they're still falling into the pattern. They're falling into the pattern of forgotten. And it's funny that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about this centuries ago. Or sorry, decades ago. I didn't mean centuries. Decades ago, he spoke about this. And change still has been made as far as the school system. It's interesting that we're still having conversations about healthcare, and that our country pays more per capita than any other country that has wealth on healthcare, but we still have people in our country that can't afford healthcare. It's interesting and it's crazy that soldiers who lay their lives on the line go to other countries and fight wars to protect our freedoms, our rights, come home, and are homeless, or not given the proper medication, the proper psychiatry help to get them to cope back into society. Their families struggle while they're away at war. How does any of this make sense? How did we go so far but do so little to change the financial climate of the country we live in? We talk about American dream, and we talk about the Martin Luther King's dream. And the focus mainly stays on how he wanted Black people and white people to live in harmony. And since now we have some sense of that, we can look at it and say, hey, Martin Luther King succeeded on his dream. So his work is done. But in reality, Martin Luther King's dream is unfinished and was left to us to finish what he started with the Poor Man's Campaign, with creating generational wealth, not only for my children, but for your children. We all have dreams. Some of you have dreams of owning your own businesses. Some of you have dreams of owning your own car, owning your own houses. Some of you have dreams of just simply seeing your children get out of the situation, the financial situation you in, go to college, get a great job, live an amazing life. And some of our dreams seem like they're so far away because as we we previously spoke on, the wealth gap between the higher class and lower class is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The middle class is disappearing. And what we're doing is, and this is going to be probably controversial to a lot of people, but this is just my theory, my belief. What we're doing is we're falling into this manipulation where the rich people are forcing the poor black people to fight against the poor white people. Now, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying racism is not a problem. This country has been fractured by racism. It's past atrocities. And that fracture is becoming bigger and causing a division between the poor white people and poor black people. And as long as we're fighting against each other, we're not realizing that our income wage, our children's generational wealth is not changing. The education that our children are receiving in school is not changing. The school system is so fractured right now. The school system is so heavily weighs on local income taxes. And during the recession, we understood that the schools were underfunded. People were losing houses left and right. People were losing jobs. The country was in complete financial chaos. But since the ship has been righted, why hasn't schools been righted? Because unless you're sending your children to a private school, your children's education is inadequate and not really preparing them for life. They're not earning real life skills. They're not earning the real life skills to send them off to college. An education that's going to promote the generational wealth that you want. But what are we doing as parents? We put basketballs in our kids' hands. We put football in our kids' hands. We teach them to be actors. We talk to them about all kinds of performance arts because a lot of times if you're living in the ghetto, you live in these rural neighborhoods, what you're realizing is there's only one way out. Well, multiple, if you want to really be technical. Well, you probably can be a sports celebrity. Maybe you be an actor, comedian. Or if you get really lucky, you can hit the lottery. And you get the winning lottery ticket, you get hundreds of $millions with no reality, no way of earning or learning how to manage or spend that money. This is the reality that many people live in today. When we look at Martin Luther King's Poor Man's March right before he died, a lot of people felt that this is the reason he was killed. Because he was trying to promote for black people, white people to come together to create wealth, where he was trying to teach the importance of ownership, owning something. I'm not talking about owning the newest Jordans or the newest jewelry or a new car, but ownership meaning owning land. Being able to have something that you can pass off and not just a bill. A lot of times in our society right now, this capitalist system we live in, we don't understand how important it is to have wealth, to have financial training, to have a skill so that you're not looking for someone to give you something, but you have something to offer your children, something to teach them. It's complicated, the life we live today. And it's more complicated because we, as people and individuals now, as an individual race of black community, feel like we won something because we won the battle of civil rights and we ended the Jim Crow laws. Because Brown versus Board of Education now allow our children to go to schools, now we feel like we accomplished something, but we don't realize even when our children are in these schools, they're busty schools, they're being taught in oversized classrooms, we're not getting a true education, and we're leaving these schools, these kids are leaving these schools undereducated, going out into the world in the workforce without the proper skills or education to actually achieve financial wellness. Kids leaving college with so much financial debt that they can't even buy a house. Older folks are so financially debt and so strapped for cash that they can't buy their medications. Healthcare is screwed up. Unemployment, they say it's down, but you have to understand how unemployment works and how they divide up unemployment based on how many people actually live in the world, how many people are working, not working. It's a very complicated thing when you break down economics, but if you research it and see it, then you see the glaring truth behind the lies that's been told to you. Martin Luther King's dream is bigger than just civil rights because, once again, he cared more about equality. Because equality means nothing without having the voice or the power to create a future for you or your children, for you and your family. We're so divided in ourselves that we don't truly understand what it means to have equality and the power of finances and to learn. We're too busy fighting against each other that we can't recognize that working together will truly put us back on top. Martin Luther King, the Poor Man's Campaign, he was bringing people from rural areas from Texas, the Midwest, Mississippi, Alabama, from people from Philadelphia, New York, Boston, together to march on Washington, D.C., to push for the end of not just segregation, but the end of inequality with finances. The end of poverty. The end where the government can choose to ignore the less fortunate, the less desirables in the world. A lot of times we look at the immigration as the issue with the problems we're having in this country. But I look at it and say, well, AI could be just as big. I'm not talking about Allen Iverson, the basketball player, or Andre Iguodala. I'm talking about artificial intelligence can be a bigger problem if you want to be technical. Let's think about this for a second. How many businesses has AI taken out? How many employees has it taken away? Think about it when you drive through a toll. How many times do you see an actually friendly face of them reaching out for your money and giving you change, rather than a computer system where you just feed dollar bills? When you go to this cashier at a local Walmart or your supermarket, how many times you see that friendly cashier giving you a receipt, asking you, do you want plastic or paper bag? Or are you just scanning your items out yourself? We lost Toys R Us, Kmart shutting down. I just heard Macy's might be shutting down. And with these companies shutting down, these smaller companies, what's happening is those are more jobs being depleted. Think about these children right now who are going to school every single day without breakfast, without food to eat. And they're expected to sit there and learn. Who can't sleep at night because the hunger pains are keeping them up. Think about kids who are going to school with holes in their shoes, dirty clothes, who are worried about getting teased by other kids, so they can't seem to focus. As adults, sometimes we don't even recognize the true atrocities these kids are taking. They suffer every single day. It ain't always about the newest Jordans. Sometimes children just want to go to school with a full stomach, a full night's rest, and not worrying about where they're going to sleep. The parents want to go out and go to work and not have to worry about whether they're going to have to make a decision to pay the electric bill or pay for food, to pay for their rent or pay for childcare so that they can work. There's so many people living under poverty level because the minimum wage is so darn low in this country. The minimum wage is so low, the poverty level is so high. And if you're in the middle class and you make too much money, you can't even get benefits from the government to help you pay for daycare or food, because they go by your gross income and say, oh, you make too much money. Gross income, if you don't know what gross income is, it's before your money is taxed, before you pay health care, or anything else come out of your check. That is your gross income. It's before any benefits are taken out. That's what you're basing on. So you got people who are making minimum wage who's coming into a society that doesn't pay much. They're forced to try to pay for child care for their children. Most single parents try to provide for their children. They have to figure out where they're going to sacrifice so the child can have the other thing. Whether they want to sacrifice having food or electric, having a roof over their head or daycare. And these children are suffering because they got to watch their parents suffer. And we wonder why generational wealth hasn't changed over to these poor, impoverished neighborhoods, and they're ignored. They don't exist. They're not covered. The way of living is not thought about. But don't worry about that, because see, you got the richer people who are sitting there, they're sitting there counting their money. 1,000,001, 1,000,002, 1,000,003, 1,000,004, 1,000,005. And they're sitting there looking at you and saying, well, you could have gotten where I gotten with hard work. And by the way, with a $10 million check that I got from my dad. But it was mostly hard work that got me to where I was. No, it was mostly a $10 million check you got from your parents who got you what you was. But also your parents had a head start into getting you the opportunities that you have today. We talk about reparations because the Black community are even further behind, because at one point we weren't even allowed to have education. It was illegal in this country for black people to even have education. We weren't able to own anything. We were far behind on finances in a capitalist system. The rules in this country weren't made yet. We are part of this franchise. We focus on illegals who come into this country and are trying to make a better life themselves. All this, the poor people want is a piece of the American dream. And all Martin Luther King wanted in his dream was for us to have equal pay, the generational wealth to pass on to our children. Let's give our children more than what we got. All my stepdad wanted was to give me information, even though I could have done without, because he could have just clearly said it. But the point is that he just was trying to give me information. But like I said, I was a rebellious kid who didn't really interested in hearing education, the truth. But I appreciate that he took the time to talk to me and try to educate me on what I need to do to create wealth for myself and to my children as they get older. And I ask you, what do you want to do? Because we have a choice. We can sit here and complain about what the government is giving us, what not giving us, and we know that our schools are underfunded. We know our schools and our teachers are not to blame because they're not given the proper material they need to teach our children. But what are we going to do as parents? What are we going to do as people, as American citizens, to fight back and to continue on pushing for Martin Luther King's unfinished dream to be finally completed, to complete the cycle that he began, the cycle to give all people equality in this America, to give people equality with finances, to give back the power to the people by owning property. What about creating generational wealth, creating a school systems for our children that they can go and learn, that we can end hunger with our children, that we can end poverty for our military? When are we going to start to change and restructure this America? When are you going to wake up and finally see that we can't wait for somebody else, or specifically the government, to fix our problems, but we got to step up and try to do it ourselves? Many people say, well, wealth is not going to bring you happiness. It's not going to bring you happiness. It's not only about wealth bringing happiness. It's about creating opportunities. Opportunities for your children so they can have a future. They can go to college. It's not about drinking the finest wine, wearing the finest clothes, getting the newest Jordan, or buying the newest car, but it is about being able to create your own dreams and seeing your children's own dreams come to reality. It's about getting an education that expands past what was written in some old book that's being recycled and handed down over the past 2 decades to children, teaching the same old history, leaving out the facts. Isn't it time that we truly dive into what Martin Luther King stood for, what he died for, and not focus on little quotes that we find like, ooh, these little positive quotes are dope, and dudes be trying to sell them to girls and make themselves sound smart, when really you ain't write the quote, but Martin Luther King wrote the quote, so you use it, Martin Luther King, to get you a little play because you ain't got no game. So, I'm going to throw this little Martin Luther King quote at her in the morning, and, she going to see this and think I'm smart, and she going to want to talk to me, but then when she sits down at dinner with you, she find out you ain't really educated, and that you ain't really write the quote, so it kind of messes things up. So you shouldn't use Martin Luther King for that reason. You probably should use your own brains and use Martin Luther King quotes and understand his mission, his true journey, and what he meant for equality, especially financial equality, and put it to work. We as people need to make a change. There needs to be changes with healthcare. Martin Luther King did pave the way for Barack Obama, one of the greatest, if not the greatest president to ever stay in office. But his dream didn't end with just putting Barack Obama in office. The finish line for Martin Luther King's dream ends when we see generational wealth. When you see generational wealth. So that should be your focus, and that should be what we're talking about. That should be what the conversation is about. But you need to learn and understand what finances is. What is true wealth? What is the true meaning of wealth is? What does wealth mean to you? How can you help rebuild your schools and teach your children beyond what they're being taught in school? How can you help the homeless? How can you help the disenfranchised people out here? How can you help yourself? Start by appreciating what you have in front of you, but not being fearful of working for what you want. Start by understanding what Martin Luther King lived for, and more importantly, what he died for. He's much more than just a quote. He's much more than just a name on a boulevard or a school. He's much more than just a day. He's a man with flaws who made mistakes. But he's also a man who died so we can have a better life. So your children, no matter where you live, in rural Texas, Alabama, the urban Philadelphia, New York, wherever you live, wherever you're forgotten are, you and your children to have a better life. You should remember him for the man he is, the man he was, and the legacy he left. And we should pass on the love, the hope that he had. Many people say I'd rather be more Malcolm than Martin because Malcolm was more of the fighting spirit. But you didn't realize the fighting spirit that Martin had, where he fought for you to have wealth, growth, financial freedom, power, true power in a capitalist system. And when you understand what those things are, then only then you'll understand what his true mission was. Think about it, people. What if you carried on Martin's dream? What if? What if? I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of Past the Present Podcast. I'm your host, Alan the Great. I want to thank you for being here for another episode, another show for a new year. I promise you this year we're going to bring a lot of great episodes, a lot of great content, some fun, more guests, more information, more taboo subjects, and more importantly, more of me. So enjoy this year as we dig into it. We're going to have some fun. I want to thank y'all for the loving support that y'all have shown. I want to thank the love y'all have shown me. I want to thank you for being here with me and being part of the Henry House Media production family and the Past the Present family. And I only got one last thing to say to y'all people before I finish. Stay tuned. Peace.